Study Section 6. Federal System in Russia. Introduction. In this study section, we will discuss the political institutions of Russia's transition period, the Yeltsin autocratic rule, and we will then look at the power relation between center and region. Learning outcomes. After you have studied this section, you should be able to 1. Explain the political institution in Russia's transition period. 2. Analyze Yeltsin's rule. 3. Distinguish power relation between the center and regions. Political institutions in the transition period. The radicalization of Gorbachev reforms was undoubtedly prompted by his inability to overcome resistance to his economic program by the party and state bureaucracy. Although he was readily elected president of the Soviet Union, he was elected by the Congress of People's Deputies, not in a direct popular election which he might have lost. Therefore, the 1990 elections of deputies to the Supreme Soviet in all 15 republics and for Soviets in regions and towns all across the country began to witness competition among political movements and parties. Yeltsin, moreover, linked his power and the cause of Russian national freedom with a program of radical markets-oriented economic reform. In the spring of 1990, Yeltsin has endorsed a program of radical, uncompromising, and rapid economic transformation intended to dismantle the old system of state ownership and planning and set loose the forces of private enterprise. The strategy discussed by Yeltsin economic advisors had much in common with the programs of stabilization being adopted in Poland and Czechoslovakia. Yeltsin's rising power forced Gorbachev to alter his strategy. Beginning in March 1991, Gorbachev sought to find terms for a new federal or confederal union that would be acceptable to Yeltsin and the Russian leadership, as well as to the leaders of the other republics. Neither Union nor Russian power structures heeded his commands. Through the fall of 1991, the Russian government swallowed the Union government ministry by ministry. By December, Gorbachev was president without a country. On December 25, 1991, he resigned as president and turned the powers of his office over to Boris Yeltsin. Yeltsin autocratic rule. The Russian Republic followed the example of the USSR and adopted its own constitutional amendment, creating a Congress of People's Deputies and Supreme Soviet. With the breakup of the Soviet Union, these representative bodies became supreme organs of legislative power in a sovereign state, rather than simply the legislature of one of 15 republics. In October 1991, following the August coup attempt, he sought from the Russian Congress of People's Deputies and was given the power to carry out his radical economic program by decree. The reforms took effect on January 2, 1992. Their first results were immediately felt as prices skyrocketed. Quickly, a number of politicians began to distance themselves from the program. Even Yeltsin Vice President Alexander Lutskoy denounced the program as economic genocide. The chairman of the Russian Supreme Soviet, Ruslan Kavlatov, also came out in opposition to the reforms, despite still claiming to support President Yeltsin's overall goals. In the Russian Congress of People's Deputies and the Supreme Soviet, the deputies refused to adopt a new constitution which would enshrine presidential power into law. In March 1993, a motion to remove the president through impeachment nearly passed the Congress. Kazbulatov, Lutskoy, and the other leaders of the rebellion were arrested. The army even lobbed artillery shells against the White House, killing several dozens of people inside. He also called upon regional Soviets to disband and hold new elections to new assemblies under guidelines that he also issued. In effect, Yeltsin was attempting to and the very system of Soviet power. In place of Soviets, he decreed that there should be small, deliberate bodies at the local and regional levels, and a national parliament called the Federal Assembly, which would replace the Congress and Supreme Soviets. The government imposed several limitations on party competition during the electoral campaign, outlying some parties and disqualifying others from running candidates. His party's strong showing was widely interpreted as a humiliating repudiation of the Yeltsin or Gaida program and a sign of the potential extremism of a nationalistic backlash against Western political and economic models. The president appoints the prime minister subject to the approval of parliament. The Duma can refuse to confirm the president's choice, but if other 3 attempts the president still fails to win the Duma's approval of his choice, he dissolves the Duma and calls for new elections. He may not dissolve parliament within 1 year of its election, or once it has filed impeachment charges against the president, or once the president has declared a state of emergency throughout Russia, or within 6 months of the expiration of the president's term. One question for Russian development as a democracy will be whether an effective working relationship developed between the presidency and the parliament. It may be that in Russia, periods of stability in relations between president and parliament come about when there is no stable opposition majority that can provoke a crisis by forcing the government's fall through a vote of no confidence. Alternatively, with time, the presidency may be occupied by less activist figures, and the government and parliament will play a more prominent part in determining policy. Since 1991, the names and status of some of the constitution units in Russia have changed. As of 1994, Russia comprises 89 constituent territorial units. In Russian constitutional language, these are called the subjects of the Federation. As was true of the USSR under Gorbachev, Yeltsin government confronted the twin crisis of relations between the central government and the constituent members of the Federation, and of carrying out deep economic reform in the face of powerful opposition. The Soviet population was more ethnically fragmented than was that of the Russian Republic, whereas half of the Soviet population was ethnically Russian and the other half was a diverse array of smaller national groups. Russia's population is 80% Russian. A second factor has to do with Russian internal administrative structure. Like the USSR, the Russian Republic was also formally considered a federation, but in contrast to the larger union, only some of its constituent members were ethnic national terrorists. Since 1991, the names and status of some of the constituent units in Russia have changed. As of 1994, Russia comprises 89 constituent territorial units. In Russian constitutional language, these are called the subjects of the Federation. Between these two kinds of units, there is constant rivalry, as leaders of Oblast and Krais complain of the special privileges that republics are given, such as the formal right to enact constitutions, elect presidents, and maintain parliament with the power to pass laws. The other republic that sought to separate itself from Russia was the Tatar Republic, situated in the Volga, in an oil-rich and heavily industrialized region. Eventually, Russia and Tatarstan worked out a treaty arrangement satisfactory to both sides, and the separatist movement in Tatarstan gradually succeeded. In Chechnya, however, armed opposition failed to unseat the secession-minded leader. In December 1994, Russian forces then attacked the republic directly, subjecting its capital city, Grozny, to devastating bombardment and forcing tens of thousands of Chechen and Russian residents to flee the city, and laying the basis for what promised to be a protracted, difficult military presence. Under the old regime, federalism in Russia, as in the Soviet Union, was largely formal. In recent years, Russia's constitutional order has evolved towards a more meaningful form of federalism in which the constituent units of the federation possess some autonomy. The new constitution adopted in December 1993 left many issues unresolved, but the new bicameral structure of the parliament has enabled the Council of the Federation to defend the prerogatives of the regions, which has helped to mitigate some of the intensity of the problem. After Yeltsin decreed the dissolution of local Soviets and the elections of new representative bodies, most regions and towns elected new organs of representative power called Dumas. Study section summary. In this study section, we learned that the fears that Russia would split apart as the Soviet Union did prove to be exaggerated despite the tragic case of Chechnya. Although Russia also underwent a wave of ethnic national mobilization with its national republics, separatism never reached the point where Russia itself, as a national state, was at the point of dissolution. The different demographic and administrative makeup of Russia and Moscow's willingness to negotiate special arrangements with some of the national republics have preserved Russia's integrity and begun the process of establishing a meaningful form of federalism. On the other hand, the central government's power over regional government is very weak, and in so many areas, local authorities wield arbitrary power much as they did before communism fall. End of study section 6. Thanks for listening.